Gloriavale Christian Community, located on the west coast of New Zealand's South Island, is a religious sect founded in the late 1960s by Australian preacher Neville Cooper, later known as Hopeful Christian. Originally established in Australia, the community relocated to New Zealand in the 1990s, seeking isolation to practice their strict religious beliefs. The community is structured around an authoritarian model, with male leaders known as shepherds exercising absolute control over all aspects of members' lives, including work, marriage and spiritual instruction. Daily life is governed by rigid gender roles, modest dress codes, and communal living arrangements, all underpinned by a strict interpretation of Christian doctrine. Over the decades, Gloriavale has been the subject of numerous allegations concerning labour exploitation, sexual abuse and psychological manipulation. In 1995, founder Neville Cooper was convicted of sexual abuse charges involving young members of the community. Despite serving a brief prison sentence, Cooper continued to lead Gloriavale during his incarceration, and the community leaders reportedly withheld information about his conviction from members, portraying him as a martyr persecuted for his faith. The community's labour practices have also come under scrutiny. In 2022, the New Zealand Employment Court ruled that several former Gloriavale residents were employees, not volunteers, and were entitled to employment rights and protections. The plaintiffs testified that they were subjected to long working hours, often exceeding 20 hours per day, and faced physical punishment for perceived disobedience. The court's decision highlighted the exploitative nature of the community's labour practices and the failure of government agencies to adequately address these issues. Sexual abuse within Gloriavale has been a persistent issue. In 2025, Howard Temple, the 85-year-old leader of the community, pleaded guilty to 12 charges of indecent assault and common assault involving female members aged 9 to 20 between 1998 and 2022. The victims reported a climate of fear that prevented them from reporting the abuse, with leaders attributing blame to the victims and discouraging external intervention. Psychological manipulation and control are central to Gloriavale's operations. Former members have described a culture of fear where questioning authority is discouraged and dissent is met with punishment or ostracism. Children are indoctrinated from a young age with strict rules governing behaviour, dress and even thoughts. The community's insular nature and control over information have isolated members from the outside world, making it difficult for them to seek help or even recognise the abuse they are experiencing. Government response to the allegations has been criticised as inadequate. Despite multiple investigations by agencies such as WorkSafe New Zealand and the Labour Inspectorate, systemic issues within Gloriavale persisted for years. The Employment Court ruling in 2022 was a significant step, but many former members argue that it came too late and that the broader institutional failures allowed the abuse to continue unchecked. In conclusion, Gloriavale Christian Community represents a profound example of how authoritarian religious sects can perpetuate cycles of abuse and exploitation under the guise of spiritual devotion. The community's history is marked by systemic labour violations, sexual abuse and psychological manipulation, all facilitated by a leadership structure that prioritises control over the well-being of its members. The failure of both the community's leadership and governmental institutions to address these issues highlights the challenges in confronting such deeply entrenched abuses. While recent legal actions have brought some accountability, the scars left on former members serve as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked authority and isolationist practices in religious communities. Gloriavale exhibits many of the hallmarks of a high-control cult, and there are compelling reasons why the community should face strict legal scrutiny and possibly be banned. Its governance structure is authoritarian, centred entirely on male leaders who exercise absolute control over members' lives, including marriage, labour, finances, education and even reproduction, which is a classic trait of cultic control where a single authority dictates all aspects of daily life. The community enforces extreme social isolation, limiting contact with outsiders and restricting access to independent media, education and information, which prevents members from critically evaluating their circumstances or seeking help, leaving them entirely dependent on leadership for both physical and psychological survival. Members are subject to coercive labour practices that amount to modern-day slavery, with children and adults forced to work long hours for little or no pay, while punishment, humiliation and spiritual condemnation are used to enforce compliance. Additionally, the community employs fear-based indoctrination, including threats of divine punishment, social shaming, and isolation from family members, which discourages dissent and suppresses individual autonomy. Another hallmark of cult behaviour: sexual and physical abuse is institutionalised, with leaders historically committing and covering up acts of assault, creating an environment where victims are silenced, shamed, and psychologically manipulated into submission. The group's insistence on rigid gender roles, enforced modesty, arranged marriages, and control over reproductive choices further demonstrates extreme social and psychological control, typical of cults. Where personal freedom is subordinated to the group's ideology and authority. Government investigations and court cases have repeatedly revealed systemic violations of human rights, employment law, and child protection statutes, yet the community continues to operate with minimal effective oversight, highlighting the risk it poses to vulnerable individuals. Former members consistently report lasting trauma, difficulty reintegrating into society, and ongoing manipulation or harassment by community members who attempt to maintain control even after they leave. Given this combination of authoritarian governance, social isolation, psychological manipulation, systemic abuse, and violation of fundamental rights, Gloriavale fits the operational definition of a cult, and the community's practices demonstrate that intervention, including the possibility of banning or restructuring the group under legal supervision, is necessary to protect the physical, emotional, and financial well-being of its members and to prevent further harm.